Katie, and this is episode 69, which is why Garet has a dick print barf stain on her shirt now.
A dick print barf stain. That's
Episode
the name
title?
of the episode, right? Yeah. We still got
it. Who says the magic dies after you have a kid? That's what I say.
I just went downstairs and I was telling my mom about the getting hit by a bus that sucks on your nipples. And we were both like, because it was really funny and I completely forgot about it until you mentioned it. So do we have housekeeping?
No, just a reminder that our Patreon, all of our Patreon subscribers are still getting ad-free episodes. So you can, if you don't want to hear ads, then you can join our Patreon for $5 a month at patreon.com/thebarisAnkleHigh. And you'll get a shout out when you do on the podcast. And also you'll have like warm fuzzies knowing that you're helping to put baby Blueberry through college or something.
Yeah. Helping us pay penalties to the government. Just kidding.
This time.
So last week I was planning on really just covering like fourth trimester stuff. We wound up kind of also talking about birth and how that went. So we talked about baby blues a little bit. So this episode we are going to talk about postpartum depression. Wah, wah. I'm only doing it because I did it in the regular depression episode, so I figured this one also needs the same thing. And I feel like that one, it was called like, it's funny because I covered it in the regular depression episode and then I forgot about it until just now, but there was a different name. I think they were calling it like perinatal depression.
Yep.
I didn't go by the correct name. I just went by PPD. But that's what we're talking about today, is postpartum depression.
Yeah. That's fair. I've had a couple people who I know in real life, but who also have listened to the podcast, like mention, like they'll message me about one or the other topics that we've covered. And if they mention the hormone episodes, I mentioned that we're covering, that we were going to be recording episodes on PPD and PPA and fourth trimester. And many of them have mentioned that they're pretty sure that they had, one in particular comes to mind who she said that she's pretty sure that she had postpartum depression after her first child, but it just wasn't undiagnosed.
Oh yeah. And I'll talk about that too. Cause I mean, I think it's kind of, to me, I read the symptoms and I made like commentary on some of these symptoms and we'll kind of laugh about it, but it was one of those like, duh, of course you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
So we talked about baby blues, which usually starts a couple days after you have the baby and lasts for, 2 or 3 weeks. Which I feel like really the primary, like, in my opinion, this is not at all scientific. I feel like the two primary motivators on that, or causes of that, is that hormone drop off in that 24 hours and the sleep deprivation. I feel like those two things, on a physiological level, are really what just like launch you into that.
Oh, totally.
Whew,
Because like, I mean,
time
they've done
period.
studies on sleep deprivation, and like you will hallucinate if you don't get enough sleep, and like your brain just goes completely haywire. But then you
Yeah.
have that hormonal drop off, and we know what hormones do to your brain, apparently.
Rude.
Yeah, some hot bullshit is what that is, but apparently they won't change the rules. And so it makes sense that it would, like, those two things together. It's not like two negatives make a positive, like,
Yeah, no,
other
it's too
than
negative to make a crying, sobbing mess of a human. That's what happens. So postpartum depression is going to be when that spills over beyond those first couple of weeks.
okay.
So 1 in 8 mothers reports experiencing symptoms of postpartum depression in the year after childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like different statistics, but I would say on average it's about 1 in 8.
Okay.
And I think sometimes it does get mistaken for baby blues. and really you're kind of spread pretty thin. So I think there's a lot of times where it comes up and it's like I just can't, I don't have the capacity to deal with this right now to like
Mhm.
troubleshoot this other thing. But
Especially
this
if it's not your first kid and you've
oh
got
yeah. Yeah.
other small people relying on you whose needs are more complex or
Yes.
who are able to articulate their needs or, to some extent, not that
Mhm.
I would call, you know, 2-year-olds particularly loquacious, but um, they are able to scream and say that they need something and
Right.
tell you what they need and also then be way less able to tolerate waiting for what they need than even an infant.
And
So,
maybe they'll ask for it specifically, and then when you give it to them, they'll tell them that you're wrong and that's not what they wanted. Like when they want a pink suitcase.
yeah, but that is actually an old wives' tale.
Hmm.
I looked into it.
I looked into it and all the old wives told me that it's not real. Um postpartum depressions are going to be more intense than baby blues and last longer. And really, it gets to the point where they can interfere with your ability to care for yourself, to care for the baby, to handle other daily things that you need to take care of. Um, the postpartum symptoms, and I think that's why they're calling it perinatal depression, because they can begin during pregnancy. They can start up to a year after birth. So it's, I think, yeah, postpartum depression is probably not the most accurate um,
Yeah. Well,
name
and
for it.
Katie Charlwood, when she was on our podcast in November, she was talking about how when she was pregnant, like she didn't have depression. Like it was like her brain was like
Hmm.
regulated for like the first time ever.
Hmm.
And like that's how she knew she was pregnant because she was with her second one because she was like, mentally I feel excellent. I'm super nauseous, but mentally I feel great. And then
Yeah, well, it's
it
like
was the
the
opposite.
ADHD.
Mhm.
Some people, when they're pregnant, the hormones work in such a way
Yeah.
with your brain imbalance that like you're at your optimum. Like you don't feel like you have ADHD. You can focus. I was so incredibly tired. I couldn't even keep my eyes open, let alone focus on something. So
Yep. Yeah.
it hits everybody a little bit different. And I mean, I think that's part of I feel like in women's healthcare, part of why maybe things are not taken as seriously, are not treated the way they should, is because everything is so subjective. Like
Mhm.
something that may be incredibly painful to me may not be painful to somebody else. Or, my experience being pregnant, this pregnancy is one way, but maybe my next child or a different child would be completely different. So I think
Mhm.
every pregnancy is so unique and impacts everybody in a different way, which I mean, if you maybe had a super stressful pregnancy, you just had a lot of life stressors that were going on that could completely impact the way your ADHD is responding to it, your medication is responding to it.
Yeah.
So there's really, I just think it's such a complex thing. There's so many factors at play. It can really make for a mixed bag, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of responds to it differently.
And I think it's interesting. It's nice that they're acknowledging that you can have this pre-delivery depression that's pregnancy induced because I think a lot of times in the past there's been the notion that the mother is like despondent or not um like not connecting with her growing belly and like, you know, acting like she's not pregnant perhaps and making pretty risky choices.
Hmm.
And there's a decent, not in every case, but I think there's probably something to be said for the idea that those choices could be the result of depression and that
Oh,
kind of
for
chemical
sure.
imbalance where you don't care.
Yeah,
You can't care.
yeah. And I do think there is an expectation. Like I found when I was when I was pregnant, it was kind of hard to, like, when you're so incredibly tired,
Mm.
and the tired that comes with that is, like, it's like a bone tired. Like, at your core, you are so exhausted, and you're physically tired, you physically don't feel well, whether you have, nausea or aches and pains or whatever it is.
Well,
Um
throwback to your insomnia, that was a good time.
oh my god, and I had that terrible insomnia, and it's like, I was so incredibly tired and couldn't really sleep, so I had to take Unisom to be able to sleep. I mean, it was just like, I think that there are, sometimes it's hard to, like, get out of that. Like, sometimes I would feel like I was just kind of stuck in that. I couldn't
Mhm.
look beyond it. I couldn't, because it wasn't like "Oh, I have, like, a stomach bug and my stomach's upset, but I'll feel better in a couple days." It was like, "I'm gonna feel like this for almost a year."
Mhm.
Um, and I think I had a hard time sometimes, like, getting out of that headspace, so people were looking to me to be, like, bubbly and giddy and excited as a pregnant person, and I think some of that is just, like, that expectation of women to be nice
Yeah.
and warm and sweet, and there's sometimes where I was like, "No, you know what? I feel like a fucking pile of garbage right now. All I wanna do is eat a normal meal and exercise and go to bed, and I can't.
Yeah.
Or all I wanna do is go home and have a glass of wine, and I fucking can't." So I think there was definitely, like,
The Welch's grape juice cider didn't didn't get you.
my God bless my spouse, he kept trying to get me, like, different non-alcoholic
You did so
wines
well with that non-alcoholic Guinness last St. Patrick's Day.
when it dumped all over my pants, and I screamed while we were recording. Um,
Oh.
or when I screamed because there was a spider and I accidentally flicked it at Katie. Um, I
It wasn't really
definitely
accidental, you definitely just intended to flick it. I was just in the direction that you were flicking.
Yeah, I still feel bad about that. I I do think, I mean, obviously the alcohol-free Guinness, the alcohol-free Heineken are great, but, um, he kept trying to, like, get alcohol-free wine, and it just tastes like booty, so, like, don't even bother with it. Sometimes, like, at a restaurant, you can get a nice mocktail, but it just is, like, one of those things you're like, I just want a glass of wine." So
Yeah.
I think, you get to the point where, because it is such it's a marathon, not a sprint,
Mhm.
and you get to the point where you're like, "Oh my god, I just wanna, like," you feel like you're losing touch with yourself a little bit. So,
Mhm.
um, I'm still at that point where, the ground is shifting, and I'm still trying to, like, kind of reconcile the new identity with the previous version of me,
Mhm.
and, kind of weave those 2 together in a way that works. Um, and, can't, because it's like, the exercising I wanna do, I really can't do, and, I don't have the time to do it, and, I wanna get fresh air, but sometimes it's just, like, too hard to get out the door. So, it's,
Mhm.
you look at this and you're like, "Well, yeah, of course you feel this way." So, like, the symptoms of postpartum depression, I'm gonna include my editorialization with each one of these, because I have notes that it's like, "Oh, really feeling this? I wonder how." So the first one they list is depressed mood or severe mood swings. Gee, I wonder if the crazy hormone changes could have anything to do with these mood swings. Huh.
Right. Well, and
Crying too much.
don't you, like, produce hormones just from, like, breastfeeding? Like,
Yeah.
each time you nurse or pump?
Well, like, especially the first, I'm trying to think how long it lasted. I wanna say, like, definitely the first couple weeks, but I think beyond that, every time you have, like, that kind of nipple stimulation, so if you're nursing, so, like, I wound up, fun fact, realized, postpartum I have flat nipples, so I had to pump because latching was just, it was hard to do, and it was this whole
Mhm.
thing, and it just turned into something where I was like, I was raw, I wasn't feeling good, it was painful for me after, like, I kinda got to the point where I was like, "I've experienced enough pain this far, I'm gonna find something that works." So she's
Yeah.
still able to get breast milk, it works fine. We're doing whatever. So anyway, so pumping or breastfeeding, that stimulation, the hormones that it causes your uterus to contract. So doing that helps you, like, recover from
Oh,
childbirth, because it's helping your uterus get back to where it should. So when you initially do that, you have the pain of the, because initially, the latch is tough because your nips are not used to that.
yeah.
Um and those gums are powerful. powerful gums, um, it causes your uterus to contract, so then you're also feeling like what feels like period cramps,
Ugh.
and your uterus contracting, you're like, "Oh my god, so it definitely is. You've also gotten the hormones from that, and I feel like, honestly, you could have a whole separate set of research just on, like, breastfeed chest I guess chest feeding would be the correct terminology for it, but that's its own journey, that's got its own stressors and its own difficulties,
Yeah.
and I think, honestly, for a lot of people, it does add if you're struggling with postpartum, it's adding to these symptoms.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, you're right, like, the hormonal addition of that is also gonna cause its own
Mhm.
outcomes. Crying too much is another one they listed. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, when you're completely overwhelmed,
Yeah.
who's not gonna cry too much when you have these hormones going on? Who's not gonna cry too much?
Well, and I mean, my mom, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but she said I was maybe 3 months old and, like, she could not get me to take a fucking bottle. She just like, I
Mhm,
refused, and she had to go back to work. So she needed me
mhm.
to be able to take a bottle because otherwise she wouldn't be able to put me in daycare.
Yep,
And she was only going back to work part-time, but she was like, "I have to work. I
yep,
don't feel like myself. I have to work." Um, and so but she was like, "You were screaming, like, absolutely red-faced. You
oh
weren't
my
even
god.
crying, like, you were just
Ugh,
shrieking."
and that
And
on
sh
its own is extremely stressful.
Right, and so she was like, I left you in your crib and went for a walk around our apartment complex
Mhm.
because you weren't gonna do anything. We
You
don't
were in a
have
safe
pets or
spot.
whatever, like,
Right.
but she was, like, home alone, and she was like, "I need to get away from this kid because,
Mhm.
oh my god." Like, I you can't reason with a newborn, like, they don't understand what you're trying to
Yep.
do or why or whatever. All I knew was that I could smell the milk in my mom, and I
Mhm.
knew that she wasn't giving me the nipple
And
that
you
I
were hungry.
liked. Right. And
You're like,
she
"Bitch,
was
feed me."
refusing to give it to me.
Yep.
And so but she had to, like, do that because she was like, "I'm
Mhm.
going to lose my fucking mind."
Yeah.
And but even being able to have, like, the wherewithal to make that call,
Yeah.
like, is
That's why shaken
very
baby syndrome is a thing.
yes.
Because people are just like they're so tired, spread so thin, and, when you have something I mean, we've been super, super fortunate. This baby only really cries when she's hungry. Maybe if she's, like, a little overtired and she's refusing to sleep, but, like, generally is not a big crier, and soothes pretty easily. Um, but it could very easily have been the opposite, and she could have had
Mhm.
colic where she's gonna spend the first 4 or so months of her life just screaming for
Yeah.
hours on end, and that rattles you. It's like it rattles your nervous system almost, like, it
Mhm.
it just causes you to feel very, frayed. I know, like, when she was maybe we had been home for just a few days. My mom was still there with us, and she was having this crying jag and couldn't get her out of it. And it was like she had escalated like beyond just crying. Like it
Mhm.
was, it was like really she had like peaked, and it was the first time she had done that. And I was like in tears. It was like one of the only times I think that's only happened to me a couple of times, but I walked out of the bedroom to get to get my mom. She's like, "What's the matter?" And I couldn't even get the words out. I'm like, "I just," she's just like, it's like my brain wasn't working.
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh my god," like I was feeling the same way the baby was. So
Yeah.
overwhelmed, like I had just reached a peak and like couldn't come back down from it. So
Yeah.
I mean, like, crying too much. The next one is difficulty bonding with your baby. Are you
Mhm.
having a hard time bonding with this little wrinkly pink thing that you don't speak the same language and is screaming in your face and waking
Mhm.
you up at all hours? Like,
That's what
not crazy.
Brooke I think it was Brooke Shields said that, like, she was
Yes.
accused of that, and, like, she was like, "Yeah, I was having" but I was terrified of being near the baby because I kept picturing myself, like, throwing it through a plate glass window.
Yes.
So I
She
was
and she
like
w she came out and talked about postpartum depression when people were not, and she got
right.
a lot of flack for that.
Yeah,
All the
especially
way
from, like,
by the
Tom
way,
Cruise.
fuck you, Tom Cruise is exactly what I was gonna say. Fuck you,
Yup.
Tom Cruise.
"Oh, just drink some tea."
We should do a Patreon just about how much we hate Tom Cruise.
Yeah. I'll write it down.
Hold on, I'm gonna make a note. Another one they have is withdrawing from family and friends. Oh, you mean during a notoriously isolating period of time?
Mhm.
Like I'm at the point, like I'm doing okay, but there are times where my spouse gets home from work and I'm like, you need to make conversation with me.
Mhm.
I don't see other people. Like, and people can't really hang out with me because people are working. So
Yeah.
it's tough. Like
Well,
I have to
working
make
and going into cold and flu season, like I've had
right.
a chronic runny nose for the past few weeks, and it's just like basically since we went to lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yep.
I mean, it's just that time of year. I'll have a runny nose until probably like February. And
Yeah.
it's just what it is. But it's also that thing where I'm like, well, I'm not going to like say, hey, why don't I come over and record? Because I mean, I would give you the information first. But it's
Mhm.
like that sort of thing where I'm not going to bother you. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't care. I'll message you. But um, if we weren't as close as we are, like if we were just like regular friends, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then I would probably just assume like, oh, I'll just keep up with you on social media and like, I'm not going to like
Mhm.
shove my life down your throat because I don't it's also I think a little bit of how I would expect because I don't want you to feel bad for not checking in with me or
Mhm.
like responding or forgetting to respond. Um but so it's like kind of that weird line where
Oh
yeah, you're
yeah.
not going to
Yeah.
keep up with people because you're busy and can't remember what day it is and they're busy and have their own lives but like you have this back and forth where it's just like you're in a very different spot and I think that's probably why especially I think during the pandemic on Facebook those due date groups became so popular so like
Oh, I bet.
everybody who
Yeah.
was due like February and March of 2021 are in this Facebook group together
Mhm.
and so your kids are kind of hitting the milestones all at the same time. You have like a group of people to ask these questions to or to rant about your partner
Mhm.
to, if that's your thing. But you have some kind of community where you don't have to like explain or preface where you are
Right.
before telling your story of the day.
Yeah.
Which, kind of helps remove that burden to socialization. Um,
Yeah. Because I
and
feel
it's
bad because, like, I know not everybody wants to hear about, how I got pooped all over. But at the same time, my
I mean, you
brain
went to Poop Acre and
I did. I was trying to explain something as a poopsicle, like a massacre, but with poop. Um, and Katie thought I wrote poop acre.
yeah, my lawyer brain read it as Poop Acre, which if any of you deal with property law or have gone to law school, you know that we'll talk about like in a hypothetical, we talk about like white acre and black acre and green acre to delineate different parcels of land, particularly if you don't have like a specific address to go off of. And so it looked like Poops Acre. And so I was like, like it just cracked me up that like the baby's the owner of like Poop Manor on
I
Poop
mean, I
Acre.
think she is. So it worked either way. Um, but yeah, it's
Uh,
hard sometimes to when I'm not really seeing a ton of other people, not really talking to a ton of other people, and I'm home all day with a baby, it's hard for me to switch gears and remember, like, oh, that's right. I used to be a person that did things and saw people and
mm,
talked about things that weren't poop acre.
yeah.
So, so yeah, like I think it's isolating by nature because you're on a maternity leave or whatever you're doing, you're in this mode. But also when you combine like that your brain has just like shifted gears.
Hmm.
Of course you're withdrawing. Sometimes I don't even think it's necessarily withdrawing from family and friends. It's just that's the nature of this time
Yeah.
period.
Well, it's
Then
like we said last episode, like your brain is trying to process that trauma, right?
yeah.
And you're 3 weeks out when you're moving out of baby blue territory and into postpartum depression territory,
Mhm.
your brain is still processing,
Mhm.
particularly if you had an especially traumatic birth or there's other things that are going on in your life. Cause like nobody else, like we said, nobody else's life stops. So you might have a terminally ill parent or grandparent
Yep.
who, like, you're also dealing with that information, or you're in the middle of moving houses and,
Mm-hmm.
there's other things going on, or changing jobs. Like, there's other things that happen that you can't control. Whether, and it's like we talked about with our justice sensitivity, there's like that circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of something else. And
What are we good
cir-
at? Remembering things.
but it's that sort of, like, I mean, for fuck, like, we're on the brink of World War III right now.
Yeah.
And there's like these different things, and if you're a member of one of those communities involved in one of those wars, then you have that going on as well. And
Yes.
there's just all these other things that can cause already a stressful situation. And then you add in, you are now the sole person, especially if you're the one that gave birth and is nursing, you're the
Mm-hmm.
sole way that this thing will stay alive.
Right.
So it's very easy, I think, especially with like late diagnosed ADHD, to put all of that pressure on yourself
Mm-hmm.
to like be the person and solve the problem and handle it. And especially not that it's like, I don't think it's like a woman thing or an AFAB thing to not ask for help, but I think there's an expectation that your instincts will kick in.
Oh, and there's an expectation that if something's wrong, mom knows what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mom's going to she'll be able to tell you what's wrong with the baby.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong
Yeah.
with her. I'm just going to troubleshoot like I always do. Like, I'll be honest, not one of
Have
those
you
people
tried
that's like,
turning it
oh,
off and turning it back on again?
did you try resetting it? Did you go back to factory settings too?
Hold the power button down for 10 seconds and then see what
Yeah,
happens.
and pat its butt, and then it'll be fine. I'm not one of those parents that like can tell from the baby's cry what type of cry it is. Like,
Mm,
I don't fucking know. Has it been about 3 hours? Yeah, she's probably hungry. Like
yeah.
that's how my and I think that there is, and that's one of the symptoms is fear that you're not a good mother,
Oof.
or feeling worthless, shame, guilt, or inadequacy. Oh,
I
do
have
you
those
use
fears
social
before getting
media?
pregnant.
Right. And if you use social media, it's constantly like are you
Ugh.
breastfeeding? You have to be breastfeeding. Are you No, it's fine to formula supplement. No, formula is science juice and it's poison. Are you, doing baby-led weaning? Oh no, that's like baby diet culture. I'm not doing that. I mean, it is like, are you cloth diapering? You can't put diapers on them. It's full of chemicals. It is what a wonder
Oh, yeah.
that like between the expectation that you're going to know with this baby in and out, and then you're feeling all of these things, and there's all of
Mhm.
these expectations that you're going to know everything with this baby, and then you've got social media and you play that into it, and then you're getting targeted content for moms,
Mhm.
and it is just like a constant bombardment, plus the pressures that you're potentially putting on yourself
Well, and there's
to
no
know.
answer. So it's not
Right.
like Googling how to change a tire on a car.
Right.
Um,
That's an excellent point.
there's 30,000 different opinions on, oh, should your mother-in-law be present? Should your mom be present? Who do you invite? When do you draw the line? How,
Yes.
whatever. What are you eating? And how do you keep your milk supply up? Are you drinking the right teas? Don't drink that tea, drink this tea, and, take this supplement and make sure you're
It
doing
has to be
this,
loose leaf tea. You're gonna get microplastics. You're
and
gonna
make
get
sure that you're still pleasing your partner, because you
Right.
don't want them to lose interest in you.
Right.
And, don't forget that your partner is also a new parent and that they're going through these things, and make sure that you're their support. And it's like, for Jesus Christ.
Yes, it
But there's no
is.
answer. So it's not even like, even
Right.
if you're having these thoughts where you're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Like, is my baby's rash because it's just babies get diaper rash, or is it because the diaper cream I'm using is causing a rash?
Yeah,
I
are
don't
they
know, let me
allergic to
Google it.
something?
Right.
Did I change diaper brands? I shouldn't have changed diaper brands. I should have waited until and you so and my go-to with this has always been like, okay, I'm going to instinctually do what makes sense to me. And
Mhm.
if that doesn't work, then I'll do some research
Mhm.
because I know that when you dip your toe in there and you start trying to figure things out by googling or by reading forums or whatever it is, it starts this onslaught where you do feel inadequate and you do feel like you're doing a bad job and
Yeah.
you're not doing enough of this or that or you pick the wrong this or that and also everything's subjective. So maybe Pampers
Yeah.
really work for other babies. For me it was blowout central and I was cleaning up blowouts every day.
Yeah.
um but I'm sure Pampers work for some babies. So
Mhm.
Huggies sponsor us. So I think that, it's kind of like pregnancy. Every baby's different. They're going to
Mhm.
respond to everything different. All the moms are different, so you're going to respond to things different. But I think that there is, plus social media, it's that, seeing the highlight reel. So you're seeing a baby when
Yeah.
it's cute. Maybe you're not seeing it when it's colicky and screaming in somebody's face for 3 hours.
Sad beige babies.
Sad beige babies. But if you should follow the Sad Beige Baby saga, where she makes the fake catalogs for the beige babies.
Yes.
It is very funny. Um, and like another one that they have is loss of appetite or eating more than usual. Okay, so loss of appetite. Maybe it's not that it's a necessary loss of appetite. Maybe it's just that I literally do not have the time
Mhm.
to. I mean, I have a hard time sometimes feeding myself a reasonable lunch during the day because this kid wants to be held. She wants to be on me. She doesn't want to be laying
Listen,
across the room.
I don't have a child, and, I do have ADHD, and I forget to eat lunch all the time.
Yep. It'll be like 2 o'clock, and
Um
I'm like, "Ah, fuck."
Yeah, like, I'll pack my lunch for work, and I'll be excited about it, and then it's, like, 1:30 or 1:50, and my Fitbit buzzes because it's like, "Hey, ass face, like, go for a walk this hour,"
I
and I'm
wish
like,
that's what
"Oh,
the Fitbits
shit."
actually said. Ass face.
You used to be able to, like, set your I don't know if it's the type of Fitbit I have now, but you could set it to, like, call you something, so you could like, "Call me princess, call me whatever."
Oh my god. "Hey, you nipple-sucking weird bus. Go for a walk."
That was the true magic school bus.
Yes. It's the cursed magic school bus. Yeah, and
Miss
that's the thing,
Frizzle
like,
goes to kink camp. That's
you can forget to eat just with ADHD.
Yeah,
So
like,
when you've got
there's so many
ADHD.
times, yeah, like, you just forget or,
Yep,
you lose your hyperfixation meal, so you're like, "Eh, nothing really sounds good, I don't care."
yep.
Like, whatever, I'll have,
I don't
like
want anything in this fridge.
yeah, like, I'll have a granola bar or whatever, which is insufficient. It's
Yep,
like, calorically, it's not sufficient if you're, pumping or nursing. You it's not. You have to eat a lot, and you have to drink a lot of water, and
yep.
but I think it's I especially with, like, how I am with certain foods and, like, safe foods, that is something that I've thought of where I'm like, "That'll be tough." Like, having options around that I know I'll eat that
That I'll
aren't
want to
just
eat
like
for
yes.
then more for a week. I mean,
Right.
it's and the other part is, you're right, pumping. I pump, I'm fucking starving and I'm thirsty. So like I was
Mhm.
saying to you recently, like, my average, like before pregnancy, not that I was counting calories, but I would say probably on average I was eating like 1,600 calories a day.
Mhm.
And I'm probably needing a good like 2,200 calories a day right now. So I'll sit there and I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm starving."
Mhm.
I'm gonna eat my arm if I don't eat something immediately.
Yeah.
Um,
Because that calorie difference, I mean, that's 600 calories,
yeah,
700 calorie difference. That's a whole full meal
yeah,
extra. So instead of
yeah,
3 meals a day, now you're thinking 4 meals a day, but full meals. So,
yep,
like, I don't eat 500 calories per meal except for maybe dinner. Dinner's usually my bigger meal of the day. And so that's like eating 4 dinners a day, which is a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of food.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing where if you're not used to eating that much, it can be like a mental hurdle. It can be a physical hurdle if your stomach is not letting you eat that much in one sitting
Mhm.
and you need to like have more small meals throughout the day.
Yep.
There's just like any number of things can
Well, and when you try and
cause a
fold that
hurdle.
right, and you fold that into, like, a newborn schedule. So,
Yeah.
I'm trying to pump when you have a baby is hard when she's with you, when they're with you,
Mhm.
because she wants to be held, and I can't really hold her when I'm pumping. So,
Right.
it's like trying to pump, get the water that I need, get the food that I need, get her fed, get her changed, burp her, and doing it in the right succession that
Right.
I can get all those things accomplished.
And then
So it
sleep when the
is
baby sleeps.
yeah, and cry when the baby cries,
Poop when the baby poops.
poop when the baby poops. It's like there are times where I will be sitting there, not unusual. She's in the boppy next to me. I'm giving her a bottle. I'm pumping, I'm eating, and I'm trying to watch something or read something all at the
Yeah.
same time. And I mean, it's like, we used to talk about multitasking on this podcast a lot. I have had to abandon all rules I had about multitasking because it's like multitask or die. Like you
Yeah.
just won't make it. So yeah,
I
when
mean,
they
thank
talk
God
about
for, like, voice memos and stuff. I don't know that we would have talked as much if you couldn't send a voice memo.
or voice to text, I'm
Yeah.
constantly doing one of the two of those because I don't have two hands.
Mhm.
So yeah, when they talk about like, okay, loss of appetite or eating more than usual, of course.
Yeah.
Inability to sleep or sleeping too much. Of course, like, I had terrible insomnia while I was pregnant, um, and also wanted to sleep all the time, and your sleep is constantly getting interrupted, so, like, you don't really have a sleep cycle.
Mhm.
I have a hard time sleeping when the baby sleeps because as much as I want to take a nap during the day, she only wants to contact nap. So she wants to
Mm.
sleep on my chest, which you're not supposed to be sleeping while she's doing that, so
Right.
even if I might nod off for a minute, it's like I'm probably getting a 10 or 15 minute, like, power nap.
Yeah.
Um, so it's sleeping too much, like, by what gauge? Because are you just trying to catch up from sleep deprivation? Um,
Yeah, and it's interesting too, I wonder because, like, your spouse is extremely involved and present in caring for the baby, but, you know, these statistics include people whose partners are not.
and single
And
parents.
right. And
Yeah,
so, it's that sort of thing where it's like, imagine if your partner wasn't taking the midnight feedings
yeah.
and, wasn't coming home and taking the baby for 4 hours so that you could do a walk by yourself without a
Still
baby
haven't done
hanging
that.
off.
Still have not gone for a walk by myself.
That's fine. But I mean, like, the option,
Oh,
would
yeah,
be
no,
there,
totally.
or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
something where you're like, yeah, you know what? This baby hasn't stopped screaming all day. So, you need to take this baby so I can go for a walk and I don't kill it.
Yeah. I mean,
Those
there's
types
times
of
where, like,
things.
I go to a doctor's appointment and stop at Starbucks, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I left the
Look at
house by
me.
myself. Look at me go.
I've got it all together.
I'm killing it." And with that, like, inability and sleeping too much, they also have overwhelming tiredness or loss of energy. How did I start the last episode saying I was a chronically fatigued pigeon?
Yes.
Yeah, so, of course.
But the coffee
Um
helped. You stopped yawning so much.
I did, that did wake me up. See, it woke me up a little bit. I needed a little bit of
Mhm.
caffeine, like real caffeine, not tea caffeine. Um,
We had a whole war with Britain over this.
sorry.
Fuck your tea.
Like on Ted Lasso when he's like, I thought tea was gonna taste like hot brown water, and you know what? It does."
And isn't it his therapist that's like, "It tastes like a paper bag that's been steeped in water?"
Yeah, wet paper bag or something. Um, so, like
He's like,
like, of
"Nope, still
course
terrible."
yep, nah, nope, still hate it. If I if I get tea at a coffee place, there's been a terrible mistake.
Mhm.
Sending it back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, of course, there's overwhelming tiredness and loss of energy, and you're either sleeping too much or unable to sleep. And I've had periods of time postpartum, not a ton, but I've had nights where um my brain is like still working
Mhm.
and I'm having a hard time, which is a very ADHD thing,
Right.
bringing it down and falling asleep. Or the flip side of that is I'm up till midnight because I'm trying to get so many things done so that my morning is going to be easier.
Mhm.
That I'm like, all right, I'll sacrifice an extra hour of sleep if that means I can have clean laundry in the morning. I don't have
Yeah.
dishes in the sink. My coffee's already prepped. My breakfast is prepped, like all of those things. Um, the next one that they list is less interest and pleasure in activities you used to enjoy, which I mean, would I like to go for long walks outside? Sure. Do I have the energy or real desire to like get up, put clothes on? Because sometimes, you're like, I got puke on my pants. I'm just going to take my pants off and not put other pants on.
Yeah.
Um, do I want to go find my sneakers and put them on? Do I want to, you know what I mean? I mean, it just
Yeah.
sometimes the barriers for things, when you're in this mode, it's like, I'm just not going to bother.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that's why it's so hard. Like, there's times where I'm like, I have to, usually for us, going to Target is like a big deal. Like, I get home from Target and I'm like, we fucking rocked it today. We did great work. We left the house. We put on pants. We
We've
saw other humans and we came home.
Everybody wore pants today.
Everybody. Um, and it's, I
And then
mean,
your
it's like,
dog is there with his tongue hanging out of his mouth.
side note, my dog whose toenail randomly came off. Did I tell you that?
No?
He's sitting on the couch with me. My spouse is putting the baby to bed. And he starts like flapping his foot. And I'm like, what is, mind you, this dog is almost 14 years old. Love him
Yeah.
dearly, but holy shit.
And he's
Starts
got
flapping
shovels
his
for
foot.
feet.
Yeah. And he's flipping. And I look and his toenail had just like completely cracked and was like sticking up.
Oh my god.
And I'm like, I texted my spouse. I'm like, I need you to come out and help me. Like his toenail's broken. I don't know what to do. I start looking at it. It falls off. It's bleeding. Like the nerve is exposed. I'm
Jesus.
like, oh, it was such an ordeal.
Does
And
your dog have scurvy?
I think he's a Tim Burton character, actually. I think that's what's happening. And that's what I've been telling people is he's just a character from a Tim Burton movie. He's
Because
just slowly falling apart.
you haven't watched Our Flag Means Death, right?
No, I have not.
So there's an episode where okay.
There we go, Sophie.
There's
She's
an
got to rest the
episode
fupa.
where they realize that they ran out of oranges and
Uh-oh.
so but there's this one crewmate who is like Swedish, I think. And so he's like, "Yeah, are anybody's else's teeth falling out?" And then like later on he's like, "I'm keeping my fingernails. Is anybody else's fingernails coming off?"
Oh my god.
He's
Because
like
they've got
saving all of
scurvy.
his teeth and fingernails because he's malnourished.
Oh
And
my
the
god.
the the captain is like, "Well, I really wanted an orange cake, and so I had the chef make me an orange cake. And it didn't really even taste like that much orange, so you couldn't have used that much." And he's like, "I used 40 oranges for that." And he goes, "Really?
40.
40?"
Oh
The
my
show
god.
is so good. He's like, "Are anybody else's toenails falling off?" It's like so funny.
Yeah, that's my dog. Uh I don't remember how I got on that.
I just mentioned that your dog's tongue is hanging
Sticking
out
out,
when you
yeah.
get back from everybody's wearing pants from Target.
Right, right, right. Good.
Yeah.
Hey, good one. Good
Thank you.
one.
Yeah. I've learned
Um
your skill of like
yeah, a
backtracking us.
backtracking.
Yeah.
That's how you got to do it. Not that it worked for me now. Cuz I
Yeah.
couldn't remember where I was before that.
We'll trade brain cells. It's
Yeah,
fine.
that works. I need it. Anything anybody can lend me, I'm willing to accept brain cells. Um, yeah, it's really hard and it's I was always like pretty busy. Like I was always just like doing stuff.
Mhm.
Um, because I had chronic, what was I calling it? Toxic productivity.
Yes.
So I've had to kind of let go of that, but then it's like, okay, I need to let go of that, not hold myself to that, but I do still need to leave the house.
Mm,
Because there's sometimes where I'm like, I haven't left the house in days. Um, I need to get out and do something. Even if it's just like running to pick up pizza, like I need to leave. Um, but it's, of course, you have less interest in that, and you also don't. It's like you really have to think about how to incorporate those things, which is
mm.
a lot of mental expenditure that you really sometimes it's just exhausting. I'm like, how am I gonna all right, how am I gonna work out? And then I'm like, I told the physical therapist, I was like, I laid on the floor to do some of the exercises and almost fell asleep on the floor. So um sometimes just getting on the floor to do them is too much for me. She was like, that's completely reasonable.
Cool.
um so yeah, it's like, of course you have those going on. And the next one is intense irritability and anger. Are you super fucking tired? Of course you're irritable.
Oh, I am, without a baby, the worst person on the planet when I'm overtired.
Yes.
Like, and
Um
I told this to PK, like, when we first met.
mhm.
Like, I was like, "It's just FYI, if I don't get my sleep, like, minimum 6 hours a night, I'm a grumpy bitch. I'm so bad."
So I will say, because I was the same way, I would be a full-blown monster if I had bad sleep. I think my tolerance for less sleep has gotten better. So,
Mm.
like, I feel like you do kind of adjust a little, not that it's, like, good, but, like, you
Yeah.
do adjust a little bit to it. And I have also found that, like, when I lay down to go to sleep, generally, I can fall asleep much quicker. And I don't have as much of a hard time generally falling asleep. Sometimes I do. Um but, also with the anger, so you're dealing with major role changes for everybody.
Mm.
And I used to just like there was a lot of things I took care of, and I've always been very kind of independent and doing things for myself. And now my spouse is like having to change gears to where I'm taking care of the baby most of the time, so he kind of needs to take care of me more, which he's
Mhm.
not used to doing.
Yeah.
um, because I would always take care of things for myself. So
Right.
there's also like that role change. So that's going to cause friction.
Yeah.
Um, so of course there's anger that you're experiencing as you're trying to make sure like things are equal between the two of you, and everything that needs to get done is getting done, and adjusting to all of that. So of course you're going to feel irritable and angry.
Oh,
Um,
for sure, and I feel like a lot of times you hear about partners resenting each other,
yeah,
and like you said, with those role changes, if you don't have, I'd say, decent communication before you have this
right.
kid, then you will probably struggle with that more because it'll be harder to say, like, "I need you to do this," or
Oh, it's
I
it's
like,
definitely
you
like a
know.
crash course in communication for
Yeah.
sure. Um, you know, you look at it like so we're best case scenario, we've been together a really long time, like we had good communication skills beforehand, and there's still bumps in the road
Mhm.
where I'm like, okay, I need for you to do these things. One of the tips I was given was like when he gets home from work, doing not just a day check-in, like, okay, how was your day? How was my day? What are things that are going on? But like a physical and mental check-in.
Hmm.
Like, okay, physically I've got this and this going on, and mentally, like, I'm not in a good mood, or I need to take a nap, or like whatever it is. Um, because sometimes you'll be like, oh, I need you to wash the bottles so we can make more bottles, but you're not also mentioning, by the way, I'm in a foul mood because I had all of these things
Yeah.
happen today. And then it causes tension later on because you haven't touched base on that. So I think that there is a major, obviously it's a major adjustment, but even we struggle sometimes, and we've got all of these things working in our favor.
Mhm.
So when people, either it's a newer relationship, or maybe you've been struggling with communication, or you notoriously have issues with certain things, like it could be very difficult.
Yeah.
um and that is going to lead to that same cycle of like irritability and frustration and resentment and tension.
Well, and
Another
then if
one,
you have those depression feelings, you don't wanna tell somebody how you're feeling.
yeah,
Like, it's
or telling them is like exhausting and overwhelming.
yeah, absolutely, especially if you're feeling like they're contributing to why you're so exhausted, then
Yes.
it's so easy to fall into that, like, "I'll just do it."
Yeah, I'll just take care of it.
Like, if you can just hold this kid, like, whatever, and then the resentment builds, and then they're resentful of you because you're treating them like a child, and
Or you're not being nice in the way you're communicating things, or
mhm.
I know
You're
like
not
we
accounting for, like, the fact that, your partner can still have a shitty day at work, like
oh yeah, like
like
or are feeling the same like inadequacy and
yeah,
irritability because they're also not getting great sleep. I mean, we've had times where this kid, when she's hungry, there's no hunger cues. We go from fine to feed
mm,
me right now, bitch. And sometimes she's like screaming and wants the bottle, and he's got the bottle, but he's like, adjusting the way he's sitting or like fixing
yeah,
something or doing something before he does that. And she's screaming, and I'm having a physical reaction because now my boobs are like, "Wah," they hurt.
mhm.
And I'm like, can you please just give
Yeah,
her
just
what
put the
she
bottle
needs?
in her mouth.
Right, and he's like, "Okay, I just had to do, like, X, Y, and Z," and he'll get annoyed with me for getting annoyed, and I've had to tell him, "The day that you have a physical reaction like I do to it, and it's, like, physically painful for you to hear it, let me know, because it's not the same for you and I,
Right,
and you need to take that into consideration when you're dealing with that, because it's not just you in this situation, it's you, her, and me." So,
right.
there's definitely, like there's so many little facets to it, and really, like, a lot for him to have to ad I feel like the adjustment one of the things somebody told me was, like, as soon as you get pregnant, you start that transition.
Yes.
Like, you have to make lifestyle changes, you're experiencing things, like, your processing of that starts from, like, day 1 when you find out and continues forever.
Mhm.
And for, like, your spouse, it may not start until maybe you're showing or until delivery or, until you've
Well, and
got a
even then
baby.
it's yeah, like, "Oh, I've gotta hang the curtains in the nursery," or, "I've gotta paint the nursery," or
Right.
things that are kind of temporary and are
Right.
checklist items. Once they're done, they're
Yes.
done.
Right.
And like, "Oh, wow, you're showing." So, like, you're actually pregnant. Now you're really showing, so it's not like, "Oh, you just packed on a few pounds."
Right. Or, "Oh, I
Like
can feel the baby kicking," or,
right.
you know
Um, but even then, you feel the baby kicking 100% of the time. He'll only feel the baby kicking if he has his hand on your
Right.
stomach when and she happens to
Right
kick at
place,
the
right
same
time.
time.
Right.
Right. So and you can tell him that you have heartburn, so you're blue in the face. It doesn't change the fact that he's not feeling the heartburn.
Mhm.
Um, and like you said, he hasn't had to change his diet. It's not that coffee tastes like pennies, or if he has anything that's like remotely Mediterranean, he'll basically want to instantly vomit from the indigestion that it causes.
Mhm.
So none of those things happened, and you can be the most empathetic person in the world, but it's
Mhm.
still like the empathy is not the same as experiencing it for yourself. And um there's also, I think, that thing where, especially for like our partners, they want to be able to just fix it
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
handle it and have it be done, and that isn't this. That's
Right.
not what this is. There is no fix for it.
Right, and there's a lot of nuance
So
to it. Sometimes it's I can't even put my finger on what I need at that, and sometimes I literally just need to sit outside.
yeah.
I need to do the lizard thing, and I just need to sit in the sun for a little bit because I haven't felt fresh air in 2 days, or I mean,
Hmm.
and I had to say that to him recently. I'm like, "I think that I'm doing most of the baby care," which I said is fine. Like, I'm home and, that's the mode I'm in, totally fine. I said, "But I'm also then doing all of her care, all of the baby care, the house stuff that relates to that and trying to keep things afloat." I said, "It doesn't occur to me to take care of myself outside of, like, eating and showering."
Hmm.
So it's like, I need you to, like, remind me and take care of me a little bit. I need you to, like, refill my water, and because otherwise I won't drink water all day, and then my supply goes down, and then I get stressed,
Right.
and it feeds this cycle. So
Yeah.
um, it's it's a very hard transition in that way.
Mhm.
Another symptom that they have is hopelessness, which that I mean, I personally have not felt, but again, I can totally see how you're like, I think a lot of people have that like, what have I done feeling?
Mhm.
Like, especially
Especially if
the
you
one.
don't have family close, I
Yeah.
think, if if you're just not close with your own mother or your mother-in-law, so you don't have that kind of generational advice, to, like, say to you, like, "You're gonna get through it. It's gonna be okay." Like, like you said, middle of the night, you walked out and you're like, you couldn't even tell your mom
Mhm.
why you were so upset that the baby was upset. And, like, she just had to say, like, You're good.
Yeah,
You're
it's
good."
okay.
But
Right.
if you don't have that person there with you to say that, and, like, if it's just you and your partner's like, "I don't fucking know."
Yeah, I don't
This
know. My spouse did say to me a few times because, like, he's the youngest child, hasn't been around babies much.
Mm.
So there's been a few times he's had to say to me, "Why would I know what that is?" And I'm like, "Okay, that's fair. I'm sorry. You're right. That makes sense that you wouldn't know that."
I remember my friend from college telling me how she had to, when they found out they were having a girl for their first kid, that she had to explain how to wipe a little girl
Mhm.
when during diaper changes. And her husband said, like, it never even would have occurred to me. Like, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
even thought that that would be a problem. Like,
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have thought of it.
And it's definitely
And
a time period where you like it's very humbling. So like we were in the hospital. I hadn't changed a diaper in like a really long time.
yeah.
But it's one of those like I'll do it and it'll be fine. But what I did was I would literally ring the bell and I would say, "Hey, like we have to do a diaper change. Can you walk us through this?" And they would send a nurse or like a CNA in who'd be like, "All right, so you want to do this, and you want to do this, and you want to do this." Cuz like that's totally true. Like my spouse has never had a vagina. So why would he know how to clean a vagina?
Right. And how to avoid a UTI.
Right.
And, little things like that where to me, it's obvious, but,
Right.
you're hauling its legs up in the air to, like,
And
clean
it's
the poop
screaming
up its back.
and
Right.
wiggling.
And
Yeah.
it's as the one who has cleaned many babies, it's intuitive to wipe back to front in that
Oh, yeah.
situation, which, like, yeah, I mean, you do to an extent, but you have to stop. Like, you cannot
Right.
wipe all
Right.
of the way back to front.
Right.
In case anybody listening isn't sure what we're referring to.
Yes.
You cannot put poo on female baby's genitals and
Or an adult. I
yeah,
was gonna
or
say
an
an adult
adult.
babies, um, also known as an
Oh
adult.
god, like that
Uh,
horrible documentary with the guy that, like, cosplays as a baby. God.
sorry to ruin everybody's day with that. But yeah, like it's the same thing. Like, and when you're, I mean, not to be gross, but like as an adult, when you're wiping yourself, like front to back makes sense because you're wiping yourself. But
Correct.
when you're changing a baby, you can't do that.
Well, and right, like, the front of the baby is facing you and not the
Yes.
back of it, so, like, you
Right.
don't put in case also, if anyone's you don't put the baby face down to change its diaper.
No.
That's frowned upon.
Yep.
Um,
Really, the only time you can put them face down is when they go into tummy time and they scream the whole time,
yeah,
and it's supposed to be good for them. But yeah, it's
allegedly.
like yeah, I think that it is a time where you just have to like admit that you don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
it's, there's no shame in that, but when you've got those feelings of, inadequacy and you don't want to be asking questions that seem like dumb questions.
Yeah.
Um Another symptom that they list is the reduced ability to think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions.
The ability to
Well,
what?
oh, you're not being, are you kidding? Are you being serious?
No, I was being serious.
To think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions. We don't know anybody like that.
Listen, it's Saturday. I didn't take my meds today.
and she's dealing with me who only has half. I have like 2 brain cells rubbed together right now, and that's it. Um,
And
and
it's
if
just
you've got
making the cricket noise.
ADHD, yeah, if you got ADHD, hello, all of those apply all the time.
Yes.
Um, and then you add in the sleeplessness and the hormones on top of it.
Yeah.
It's of course you feel that way.
Well, and all
Um,
I'm thinking with, like, the mention of hormones with ADHD is, like, that, like, 6-week period, and then, like, you get your period back theoretically at some point, and then but you have the same, like, estrogen and PMS, like, fluctuations in your
mhm,
brain that are also then interplaying with all these other factors,
mhm.
and it's just, like, I don't know, like, maybe it was a mistake to talk about it. It seems overwhelming.
It should be illegal, right?
Maybe maybe, ignorance is bliss on this one.
Katie's like, "I've thought about it, and I don't wanna be hit by the bus that's gonna suck on my nipples."
No, I don't.
It's yeah, like, I read that, and I'm like, "Yeah, like, of course you feel those things."
Yeah.
Restlessness is the next symptom. Restlessness? Oh, you mean like and you and I were talking about this, obviously, off air the other day, but I was telling you that I'm having a hard time getting rest because there is always something to do.
Mhm,
So, I'm like, "Okay, the baby's good, this," like, okay, I should make formula and get some bottles made
mhm.
so that, the next time she has to eat, I'm ready to go. And I should put in a load of laundry and, do this before I do this so that I'm, ready for this. And I can sit down and try and relax or sit down and take a nap. But in the back of my head, I'm like, "Ugh, I should really get these other things done," which is not a toxic productivity thing. It's like keeping your head above water because if
Mhm.
the laundry gets too far behind, you don't have clothes. And you don't
Yeah.
have pumping bras and you don't have all of these things that you need to be clean, and these aren't just like, "Oh, I got a little bit dirty." They smell like vom because a baby has
Yeah.
vommed on them. So it's, that
It's
restlessness, it's like, of course you feel that way.
I did that to PK this morning. We were just watching, like, old episodes of, MasterChef, and, like, the way the sun was coming through the curtains, I could, like,
Mhm.
see all the dust and shit in the air,
Yep.
so it was just annoying me, and, so, like, something happened, like, he got up to go to the bathroom, and I was like, "Okay," and I just, like, started getting the vacuum cleaner out, and I was like, "I'm just gonna vacuum." And he was like, "Okay, I'll pause it then."
Yeah, I never
But it's
rage
that's
clean, I don't know what you're talking about.
it wasn't even like a rage clean, but it's something that my mom has always done. Like, I don't know that that woman has sat down and watched a full movie at home
Mhm,
in 35 years since I was born. She would
mhm.
always, like, put on a movie, and my brother and I would watch it, and then she'd do laundry and get dinner started and
Yep.
bring the laundry upstairs, and then she'd probably vacuum or do dishes and empty the dishwasher, and
Let
then
me just quick
she
clean the countertops and tidy
yeah.
things, I'm just
She's
gonna
gonna let
wipe
the
stuff
dog out,
down.
and
Yep.
yeah, she's gonna clean this, that, and the other, and, oh, she'll wipe down the, like, clean the bathrooms and, just, sweep and get these
Mhm,
things, like, situated, and our house was always clean when I was a kid. Like, I don't have no memories of my house being dirty,
mhm.
and but my mom was constantly doing that sort of thing, and then I caught myself doing it this morning.
Well, and my attitude too with this is always like, I would rather spend 5 minutes doing it now than an hour doing it in 2 days.
Mhm,
So I'd rather just do a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So, like, before I go to bed, I'm putting in I will say one of the things that has helped me a lot is I put a load of laundry in and I do the delay start so that it
mhm,
doesn't actually wash it until, like, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So when she gets up at, like, 6, I can switch the laundry over
mm,
and I don't have to worry about, like, putting it in and collecting it at that point, like, it's done and washed, and I switch it over, but it's like, it's making sure that all the pump parts are washed and all the bottles are cleaned, and I have bottles made and prepped and in the fridge, and the kitchen's relatively clean, and the coffee's prepped, and I've tidied the living room and wiped stuff down, and, I mean, you kind of wind up it's like the Tasmanian devil goes through your house every day
mhm,
and just throws, like, pukey clothes and pukey, burp cloths, and there's just, like, shit everywhere. Sometimes, like, I'll
yeah,
change your diaper, I'll forget to throw the diaper away, so I just find, like, a bundle of diaper sitting someplace because I set it down and forgot to throw it in the garbage.
yeah.
Um
I've seen those in every person's house that I've gone to that has had a baby
Oh,
recently.
that makes me feel better because I forget
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
unless it's,
no,
like,
I've
really rank.
like, it doesn't
Um,
even like, it's especially because like, it seals itself, like, you just tape it
yeah,
closed, and so it's like this little contained grenade
yeah.
of, biohazard,
I
and,
usually joke that, like, it could be a weapon.
well
Like, if I needed to use it for home defense, I could.
well, especially when Poop Acre happened in the car seat,
Yeah.
um,
Poop juice on the car seat. So, yeah, like, I
calling it
guess feel
juice
like
is especially heinous, just FYI.
so because sometimes it's not always the poop, it's just, like, the liquid. It's awful. It's disgusting, and this is what
No,
I'm
I
saying,
under
like,
that's all I'm
not
picturing
everybody
is,
wants to
like
hear about poop juice, but my brain is full of poop juice. Episode title.
we had one at the beginning of this episode, I don't remember what it was, but
I think it was the nipple bus.
no, that's
I
how
think
we
it was
ended the
the
last episode.
nipple sucking bus. Oh, I don't know then. You're right, we did have another one. Well,
I
part
don't
2,
know, find out when I listen.
because 'cause we'll definitely forget. So yeah, it's just like I feel like of course you feel restless because there are a million and one things to do.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other these last 3 I feel like are all like the cornerstones of like when people think about postpartum or perinatal depression, severe anxiety and panic attacks, thoughts of harming yourself or the baby, or recurring thoughts of death or suicide.
Mm.
Um, so which I have not experienced those, but it was one of those like when I said to my spouse, like, this is what I was working on. I was like, I was reading the symptoms. I read through almost all of those and said, "Of course you're feeling that way." So
Yeah.
then I'm like, "Oh wait, do I have perinatal depression?" But no, I don't feel overwhelmed by any of them.
Just regular
And
whelmed.
just I just feel whelmed.
Mm.
But it's like, these symptoms are all very, very valid. And I think so many of them are the nature of like what this transition means.
I think that's
Um,
why it goes undiagnosed though, because it's that sort of thing where you're
100%.
like, of course I'm tired. And of course, I'm pissed off at my spouse because they get to go to
Right.
work every day and they don't have to be covered in puke all the time.
Of
And
course I'm irritable, and of
right.
course I feel restless, and of course I'm not seeing people and doing the things I normally do.
And especially
Um,
with pumping or like we said in that Patreon episode, like people who exclusively nurse, like you are tied to the
yeah,
baby.
yeah.
So, when you're doing all these things,
Your
even with
life is in like
pumping.
3-hour increments
Right,
all the time.
exactly. Even with pumping, like you said, you have to make sure that the bottles are all cleaned and
Mhm.
sterilized and your equipment is ready to go and you've got the right bras that you need to wear and things are situated like there's this constant like running list of things to do that refreshes every 3 hours. You have to do these
Yep,
things. And so, like, of course, you feel overwhelmed and you forget
right,
to eat, or when you
right,
do eat, you overeat, or what you do eat is not, quote, healthy. And
right.
so you're struggling with that and you're trying to remember to drink your water, but then, and then on top of it, like we said, you've got dogs, you've got family members that have their own needs and their own lives. You
Or
have
people
friends that are
wanna
going
stop in
through
and see the
things.
baby and, they wanna come visit, and then you're like, "Gosh, my house is a mess," and I've always been one of those people that I may not, like, clean my house before somebody comes over, but I'm gonna, like, tidy. Like,
Mhm.
I'll, do a quick wiping things down and make sure, it's, like, reasonable looking because I am somebody who, when my space is messy, it makes me feel anxious.
Mhm.
So I do it more as a preventative thing for myself more than I do for what somebody else is gonna think. I'm not as concerned what somebody's thinking about, how my house looks with a new baby. I'm more concerned that I'm gonna be feeling anxious because I feel like I'm sitting in a messy space.
Mhm.
So, it's
Yeah. When I lived alone also, I could get away with really just doing one clean a week in my little apartment,
right.
and now living in a house with another person and twice the number of animals, um, I can't. Like, I have to do I'm doing the dishes multiple times a week, but I
Mhm.
have to be tidying and, like, making an effort to put things away where they belong, throughout the week,
Yeah.
and that's been a transition, and I don't have a baby to to also
Mhm.
clean up after.
And that's always been,
Um
like, an evening thing for me before I went to bed, I would, like, kind of tidy things, so that's, like, always been in my schedule.
mm,
Um, but I mean, it's also, like, this adjustment, I wanna just crash and go to bed, I have to pump
right.
before I go to bed.
Yeah.
So I have to sit and pump and, put the breast milk away, and I need to track it so I know how much I pumped. And I mean, there is a big, when they talk about, like, the mental load that goes with that.
Right.
It used to be like I'd brush my teeth and throw myself into bed.
Right.
And those days, that's not life right now. I mean, eventually when I'm not I hate this word, but lactating anymore, I will be able to just, like, kind of yeet myself into bed. But, like, right now, it's such an ordeal trying to get myself into
Mhm.
bed. And it really is, like, in these 3-hour increments. By the time you meet all of the things that you need to get done in that 3 hours, the next 3 hours is already there.
Yep.
Um, so I think,
Oh
not
my god,
only
imagine
is
if
it
you had had twins.
I think that to myself at least, like, once a week. That, and imagine if I was a single parent, and I'm like, "Holy shit." I did my first overnight with my spouse gone for a work trip, and I was by myself with the baby for, like, 36 hours. I was dead. I was, like, clinically dead by the time he got home.
Yeah.
I'm like, "This was so hard."
And
And
weren't you
again,
sick?
um,
Or was that a
that
different week?
was it was a different week. I got sick after that.
Okay.
Um And that was another time where I'm, like, reaching out to all my mom friends, like, "Do I distance myself from this baby, or do I
Mhm.
just let everybody get sick?" Um,
Yeah.
so I think that it's a time, like, dealing with these symptoms, I think it's something that either moms aren't they don't have the time and the headspace to even be aware of. I think that there's a lot of expectation, um, of being, happy about this phase and happy about your baby and loving your baby, that they feel embarrassed or, like, guilty or ashamed of feeling depressed.
Right.
And they don't want to be seen like they're a bad mom.
Mhm.
Um, and I think so many of these things are just inherent to this phase, that
Mhm.
it is just they're just such valid things to be dealing with.
So do you
Um,
think the right thing to do is to treat everyone as though they have postpartum depression
you know
and
what's
provide
funny?
solutions?
So I was at Target, and this lady who was probably in, like, her mid 50s started making conversation with me and talking about that postnatal period. And she was just giving me, like, it was another one of those, somebody giving me so much tenderness that at the end of the conversation we both cried. And it was just like we just talked to each other in Target. I have no idea. I don't even know her name.
Mhm.
But we had this really sweet conversation, and she was asking me if I was dealing with postnatal, perinatal depression. And I was like, "No." I said, "But I take antidepressants." I said, and I was taking them before I had the baby. So I said, I do think it softened some of the, like, hormonal fluctuations a little
Yeah.
bit. Um, and she said to me, they should put it in the water. She said, like, literally everybody that has the baby they should just put antidepressants in the water, because I really do think that I kind of like pelvic floor therapy. I think it almost needs to be, like, part of the
Standard
like, the
care.
discharge to
Yeah.
standard of care when you have a baby, because um and I'm not somebody who's like, "Oh, medication needs to be, like, the first go-to," but with this, like, you don't have the bandwidth for a
Well,
lot
right,
of
like, where
other.
else are you gonna get the solution from? Because it's not
Right.
something where, you know, the more, I guess, holistic, I hate calling it that, but the holistic solutions to depression, like diet and exercise and get fresh air and, make sure that you're going for a walk every day and that you're getting your heart rate up and that you're eating lots of leafy greens and,
It's hard.
um, right, like
Right.
when?
Right.
Because you know what takes a long time to eat? A fucking salad. You know what takes no time to eat? Mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what?
Or make. I have to chop things. I only have
Yeah,
one hand half the time. Like, I'm
right,
holding a kid in one hand, and I've literally tried to cut vegetables with my other hand. It's a
right.
disaster.
It's ridiculous.
Um,
And so it's that kind of thing where it's, those other options for handling depression or anxiety, while they're still options, they're not accessible
Right.
in that period. And I
Right.
think the, you know, like we've said before, you don't have to be on an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication forever. You don't have to be on any medication forever, I guess, if you don't want to. Um,
Right.
but it's the sort of thing where, yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm all for pharmaceutical interventions for depression and anxiety. I think that they are underutilized and overstigmatized, and I am all for it. Um, speaking of food delivery.
Speaking of mac and cheese, my mom just brought me a bowl of mac and cheese.
Oh, perfect. Our telepathy is working. But, the so yeah, I mean, I'm just I think I would agree with that lady in Target that using, um, just having that be a standard of, here's your your painkillers, days 3, 4, and 5 of oxycodone to help you cope with the pain of your abdominal surgery, and here's your Zoloft medication or your Lexapro medication to also help you transition in this period, and we'll talk in at your 2-week follow-up about how that medication's working for you, or 6 weeks or whatever it is, and we'll go from there. And if you need more medication, then I'll transfer you to your primary for management of that. And but it makes sense. Like
Oh,
it's
100%.
so it's so logical. Like there's no, like, you don't have to make any connective leaps to get to that conclusion that medication probably is necessary just to bridge that gap to help you.
Right.
Like I said, like, we should be getting estrogen shots for that hormonal drop off, because what the hell?
Oh, yeah,
What the
yeah,
hell?
so that
That's
it's like
some
a gradual. I mean,
Yeah,
it's and then you've got women that are, like, kinda blaming themselves for feeling this way,
right.
and all I can
Which
think, I'm doing this research, I'm like, of course this is how people are feeling. Like,
Right, and
look
that's
at
not
this.
even considering, like, cultural expectations
Right,
that folks might have or that their families might have of them, which, like, some cultures are super involved in that postnatal period. I saw some story where, like, in Chile, they like, the whole family basically moves in with you when you have a baby. So mom's only job is, like, keeping the baby alive, and then, like grandma and aunts will make sure that mom gets fed and bathed and hydrated.
yep,
The grandpa and uncles are like handling all the chores and
I love
making sure
that.
the other kids get to school and get fed and whatever. But like all of that is handled for like the first 2 months,
There
like
was a day
fully handled.
my mom and my aunts came over and, like, fed me, cleaned my kitchen, like, refilled my water, like, wiped everything down, put stuff in my fridge, like, took care of the baby, and I was able to just, like, sit.
Mhm.
I was just, like, sitting and chatting, and I didn't feel like I had to do anything
Yeah.
because they were just, like, and it was a, "Oh, we wanna see the baby, but, like, how are you doing?" Because so
Mhm.
much of the time, and I don't blame everybody for being so excited about the baby, but, I mean, it's basically like opening the door and somebody just, like, walking right past you.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like you're just, like, kind of forgotten about. So,
Mhm.
you combine that factor into all of these other things, so, like, no wonder you're feeling that way, but also, like, a lot of people are gonna kind of forget about you because they're excited about the baby. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just, I think, like, those feelings are so incredibly valid, and that was, like,
Yeah.
my biggest takeaway when I was reading the symptoms. I'm like, "Duh, duh, duh." Like, all of my notes is like, "Oh, are you feeling this way? Of course you're feeling that way." Um, so, yeah, I think, like, one of the most key takeaways of this is, like, those feelings are 1000% valid, like,
Mhm.
1000% valid. Um, So I think what we'll do is then next week we'll talk about like risk factors for postpartum depression.
Okay.
Um, we'll talk about like the kind of some of the hormone things that happen behind that. And then we'll also talk about treatments
Okay.
and different techniques and maybe some postpartum anxiety.
Okay.
All right, cool.
And then it'll be almost time for Christmas music.
Ah! Yeah, actually, I mean, we probably should do Christmas music just like all of December, right?
Oh, okay.
Katie's like, yes,
I mean,
and
I'm
every
all
other
for
month.
it. I just didn't know if you wanted it on the postpartum depression episodes.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think we should do it anyway.
Okay. But join our
I
Patreon
think,
if you want that as a ringtone.
oh
That
yeah.
and our spooky music are available to Patreon subscribers as downloadable ringtones.
And if you need a hit of like happiness, you can see the video. I think we posted that on Instagram where you heard the Christmas
Yes.
music the first time, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is like something that like, okay, when sad, think about this. I'll think about the first time Katie heard the Christmas music. Because I've never seen such pure joy except for watching Elf or seeing Katie watch Elf.
Yes. A friend of mine had a kid a couple years, I think he's like a year and a half old now. And she sent me a picture the other day of him watching Elf and was like enraptured, like standing in front of the TV, like watching Elf, like holding like a dinosaur toy. And I was like, "Oh my
That's so
god."
cute.
It was so cute. I was so excited. um but yeah, so that was episode 69. Damn, she's fine. Um
We're stupid.
yeah. Also, whoops, Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Sorry about that, gang.
Wah, wah. Did I do
And
one of those at the beginning of this episode or was it the previous episode? I don't remember. It's all
no,
the
I
same.
think you did it this episode.
Well, now you get to
I don't know. But either way, and this comes out December 7th, so I'll be a year older by the next time you hear my dulcet tones. Just aging.
Speaking of depression. So tune in next week. We'll talk about kind of the next chunk of this information.
Yeah. Oh,
And
leave us a 5-star review.
definitely leave us a
Wherever you
5-star
find
review.
us. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarsankle-high. Follow us on Instagram at thebarsankle-high for that weekly episode poll and to see, funny shit that we share on the reg. And our merch is at bit.ly/ankle-high-merch. I think that's all.
Cool.
Okay.
And remember to put antidepressants in your water. Period. Just put it in your water.
Okay.
Just take antidepressants. Take your meds.
Take your meds because the bar is ankle high.
Bye.
Bye.